A man's voice echoes through the heavens, shouting Mumyeong's name. On the ground, a dirty, skinny girl is startled by the sudden call. Then, a heavenly voice commands her to protect a child, for this would be her only reason for living. This order came from the head of the celestial clan, the great Cheon Muryang. The girl then understands that this will be her new life's mission. With that, she looks at the little boy she must protect, the first son, Cheon Muryang. Even in her miserable condition, the young woman accepts her destiny without question. At that moment, she had no idea what the future held for that crying boy. The girl only saw a child who needed her protection. Little did she know this boy would become the disgrace, who would bring ruin to the entire celestial clan. 15 years go by, and a heavy rain begins to fall. In the meantime, the head of the family suddenly passed away, leaving everything to his son. The new leader, Cheon Muryang, only made things worse, and the clan's influence vanished. With the fall from power, many people began to abandon the family. But the young protector remained by her master's side the entire time. Countless assailants came after the boy, and she fought them all to protect him. The girl dedicated her life as a bodyguard to that despicable man. However, the ones she protected seemed to be very afraid of something. Suddenly, two mysterious figures appear at the door amidst the rain. In an act of betrayal, the man she had protected her entire life strikes her from behind. In disbelief, she calls her master's name, not understanding the reason for the betrayal. The young woman then wonders if a blade was the payment for all her devotion. But the betrayer looked terrified, crying like a frightened child. With her strength fading, the protector coughs and falls to her knees. The pain of betrayal seemed far greater than the serious wound in her chest. They say you can't fix a broken person, and he was living proof of that. All the guards she had defeated before were now lying in the rainy courtyard. The master seemed desperate, trying to explain something to the newcomers. The mysterious hooded figures slowly approached him, without saying a word. Even wounded, the girl gathers her last bit of strength and begins to remove the sword. With hatred in her eyes, she calls out the name of the man who betrayed her one more time. She then asks if he really thought they would let him live in exchange for her life. And she questions if the demonic cult would really help revive the clan he himself destroyed. The young woman accuses him of believing this was the only way to survive. With blood in her mouth, the protector states that her master was completely wrong. At that moment, a frightening bolt of lightning illuminates the entire night sky. The light then reveals the true identities of the visitors from the demonic cult. A woman with a bizarrely altered face was among them, and a masked giant carried the remains of their enemies as trophies. Seeing those frightening figures, the cowardly master goes into a full panic. One of the cultists says that if he wanted to live, he shouldn't have gotten them involved. Then the giant attacks the cowardly master, who tries to run away, screaming in fear. With a single blow, the traitor's life is brought to a swift end. Watching the scene, the protector regrets having served that man from the very beginning. Lying on the ground, he wonders if his former lord was watching everything. The warrior then realizes that the first son was never worth protecting. He regrets not having abandoned that good for nothing and remembers his past. With that, the protector's sword falls from his hand, the sound echoing through the courtyard. Kneeling and powerless, the man looks at the bodies scattered on the ground. The rainy sky seems to reflect all the sadness and regret in his heart. He then accepts his end, saying there's no point in blaming anyone now. Staring into the void, the protector states that now, only regrets remain. In his eyes, we see the reflection of the sky from the day his life changed. He remembers that he originally didn't have a name, before being taken in by the celestial clan, and it was there that he received the name Mumyeong, which basically means no name. The warrior looks at the clan building one last time, accepting his tragic fate. His last wish is that if he could be reborn, he would like to have a name of his own. He also wishes not to be reborn as himself, as the cultists deliver the final blow. And so, the man with no name finally met his end on that rainy night. The end then embraces him, and it feels like a cold and lonely thing. But the cold darkness suddenly transforms into a warm, gentle light. He feels gentle hands washing his feet in a basin of warm water. Slowly opening his eyes, the man is confused by the pleasant sensation. A young servant girl is taking care of him with a focused expression on her face. He suddenly sits up, startled, and the girl falls backward, screaming in shock. Confused, he wonders what is happening and realizes he is alive. He clearly remembers his body being pierced by numerous blades. The servant apologizes, thinking he's angry about the water, but he recognizes her. She is Muryang, the first son's personal maid, who was always mistreated by him. He reassures her but questions why she is calling him young master. Ignoring the girl's confusion, he asks where Cheon Muryang is. The servant then replies that he is young master Cheon Muryang. Not believing what he heard, the man touches his own face in complete despair. Desperate, he runs to find somewhere to see his reflection. In the water basin, he sees the face of the young traitor he hated so much. Later that night, he confirms that all of this is not a dream. Not only is he alive, but he's also gone back 15 years in the past, in the body of that good for nothing. Sitting on the bed, he looks at his new, pudgy hands, not knowing what to do. He then asks the servant if there is someone named Mumyeong in the clan, but she says no. He understands that he has become Cheon Muryang, and because of that, his former self no longer exists. He sees this as an opportunity to protect the celestial clan with his own hands. With that, he decides he will figure out how to do it little by little, as he has 15 years ahead of him. But putting that aside, he wonders why the first son's room is so plain. The place is barely larger than a common apprentice's room, which is very strange. Looking around, his gaze stops on a shiny object on a shelf. That bluish gleam seems familiar, and he tries to remember where he's seen it before. Then he recalls that it was the same sword used to take his life in the past. Shocked, he recognizes the celestial light sword right there in front of him. This is the legendary blade that was born from a single ray of light that pierced the darkness. And it is also a treasure bestowed only upon the first son of the celestial clan. He can't believe that the powerful celestial light sword now belongs to him. With a smile on his face, he admires his reflection in the sword's sharp blade. As he unsheathes the weapon, an intense light illuminates the entire dark room. He realizes it's on a completely different level from the swords he used before. Excited, he tries to make a few moves with the legendary sword in hand, but his current body is too weak, and he can barely lift the heavy weapon. He gets out of breath with the slightest effort, showing just how out of shape he is. His legs tremble, and he almost drops the precious blade on the floor. Exhausted, he kneels on the ground. Panting and completely out of energy, he can't believe his breathing and muscles are already at their limit with so little effort. That same night, our hero begins to investigate the state of his new body. He then sits in a lotus position to meditate and analyze his internal energy. The young man finds it strange, because even the body's former owner should have been able to use a sword. Normally, internal energy is cultivated in the dantian and flows smoothly through the meridians. But upon checking the boy's body, he discovers that something is very wrong with his energy. A huge amount of energy is trapped and clashing in his dantian and meridians. This looks like a classic case of an overdose from elixirs that rich boys tend to take. He diagnoses the problem as Golden Spoon Q Aviation and heads to the training grounds. Arriving there, the young man sees several apprentices practicing their moves with wooden swords. In the middle of training, one of the guys hits his opponent's head with all his might. The boy who was hit furiously complains to his partner for aiming at his head, but the attacker just calls him a girl and says he should pay up on the bet he lost. Angrily, the loser says that round didn't count and refuses to accept the result. The winner is confused by his friend's reaction and stares at him, not understanding the tantrum. At that moment, the two notice our hero's arrival, and one of them recognizes him. The other then questions what that good for nothing is doing there, since he never trains. Our protagonist can barely hold the sword and realizes his body is a mess. One of the apprentices tells him to leave because nobody wants him around. Ignoring the comments, he decides the priority is to lose this fat and starts running. The other warriors are completely stunned as they watch the bizarre scene of the chubby guy running. With great difficulty, our hero runs through the courtyard while everyone watches him with contempt. Seeing the bizarre scene, 3 of the apprentices start gossiping about the chubby guy running. One of them then comments that the young man doesn't seem to have any intention of leaving, with a wicked smile. The other warrior says he's going to make him regret ever showing up. The bully then throws his wooden sword toward our hero. The boy can barely stay on his feet as the object flies in his direction. He then realizes that his body's condition is much worse than he imagined. The countless elixirs the previous owner took have turned into a potent poison. If the boy had trained, he would have an internal power that everyone would envy. But first, he needs to prepare his body to absorb the elixirs and train. Suddenly, a real sword flies toward him and grazes him. The blade passes by him and gets stuck in a nearby wooden column. Shocked, the young master looks at the sword, not believing what just happened. He wonders if that was really a real sword and becomes terrified. The bully approaches and apologizes, saying the weapon slipped from his hand. Behind him, the group of apprentices laughs at the situation with contempt in their eyes. The leader of the bullies makes a mocking face as he approaches the fat boy. Our hero faces the aggressors with a serious expression, breaking out in a cold sweat. They warn him that the place is dangerous and recommend that he go back to his room. The protagonist wonders if things were really like that in the past. The bully thinks that with a warning like that, the pig will go back to hiding in his room. With a fake smile, he apologizes again for the accident with the sword. But the young master thanks him for his concern and says he will be careful. Then he turns and starts running again, leaving all the bullies behind in confusion. The group of bullies starts laughing at him, and one of them collects a bet he won. With the bet money in hand, they decide to go drinking to celebrate, but the group's leader glares at our hero with hatred in his eyes and grinds his teeth. Despite the provocation, the young man continues his run, not caring about them. He finds those warriors despicable but decides to hold back, knowing he would lose. Putting that aside, he focuses on his goal, which is to go to the library of the Heavenly Dragon. As the eldest son, he believes he will have easy access to the clan's secret martial arts. The sun begins to set, and the boy finally reaches his destination. Arriving there, he finds 2 guards blocking the entrance to the great library. Confused, he asks one of the guards what he just said. The guard then sighs with an unfriendly look on his face at the young master. He repeats that the young patriarch has been stripped of his position as the successor. With that, the protagonist is in shock, as he did not expect this news. Because of this, his entry into the library was completely forbidden. With his legs trembling, the young man returns to his room, unable to believe what he heard. Devastated, he throws himself onto the bed, not knowing what to do now that his plan has failed. Sitting on the bed, he looks around and stares at the door of his small room. Then he finally understands why his room is so simple and small. He intended to find a way to absorb the energy from the elixirs, but will have to change his plan. Looking at the ceiling, he remembers that the childhood of the body's previous owner was anything but easy. He remembers that the boy had a body ruined by elixirs and was surrounded by enemies, and he recalls the betrayal, wondering if the young man saw him as an enemy too. Angrily, he clutches the sheets and says he doesn't need excuses for that trash. The boy blames the body's previous owner for bringing in the demonic cult and destroying the clan. He understands that the lack of allies was just a consequence of the boy's actions. At that moment, he notices there's something on his table. He then sees the food the maid left and complains that it's only mushrooms with no meat. Our hero wonders how the boy got so fat eating such bland food, but he remembers that despite everything, the young master had at least one single ally. The next day, our hero decides to continue his morning training. In the courtyard, he begins to stretch to prepare his body for the heavy exercise. With minimal effort, the boy is already panting and completely out of breath. He can't believe his body is sore and tired just from warming up. Suddenly, the maid appears and is surprised to see that he is already awake so early. Carrying a few things, she then asks if he is going to train again today. A bit embarrassed, the young master replies yes, and the girl wishes him a good day. As she passes by him, the boy notices that the maid is carrying his clothes. He asks if those are his clothes, and the girl is startled by the sudden question. She apologizes for the delay and explains that she fell asleep while waiting for him the previous night. He thinks that even though she isn't much help, she is still his only ally. The maid is startled by the young master's sudden approach and steps back a little. Then he places a hand on her shoulder and thanks her for her hard work and dedication. Completely panicked, the girl doesn't understand what he means by that. With a smile, he apologizes and warns her that she will have a lot more work for a while. After that, the boy turns and starts running through the courtyard again, to continue his training. The young woman stands there, watching her master with a confused expression and a flushed face. Night falls once again, and the full moon illuminates the entire heavenly clan. But our hero doesn't stop and continues running through the courtyard, even in the darkness. His fat and heavy body can barely handle the effort, but he does not give up on his goal. Sweat drips down his face, and he breathes with great difficulty with every step. He feels as if he is passing out from the intense pain running through his entire body. At that moment, a memory of his past life as Mumyeong comes to his mind. He remembers his master yelling at him during a very tough training session. The master questions if he really wanted to go to the New Year's festival. Angrily, the man calls him ungrateful and orders him to perform the strike 100 times. His superior accuses him of being too slow, while the young man trains alone in the courtyard. Meanwhile, little Cheon Muryang was having fun with his father at the lantern parade. The young warrior wonders if he was ever able to decide anything for himself. He had no choice but to repay the grace of the patriarch who took him in. But in contrast to his past, he can now make his own choices. With a smile on his face, he thinks that this is all very fun. Hidden, the maid watches the young master running with difficulty through the courtyard. The girl has a worried expression on her face as she sees his condition. Suddenly, the boy can't take it anymore and collapses on the ground from exhaustion. She runs to help him, and our hero realizes that the girl is stronger than she looks. The days go by, and the young man continues his intense training, even in the rain. The group of bullies watches him and complains about his daily persistence. One of them collects the bet he won because his friend bet that the fat boy wouldn't show up. Annoyed, the loser of the bet complains about the young master's pathetic attitude. A colleague tells him to shut up, but he doesn't care if the boy hears him. He continues, saying that even if the young man becomes patriarch, he will have no power. The bully explains that there is the Council of Elders and Commander Cheon Hak, and because of that, the disciples only need to follow one of the two and ignore the young master. With the bet settled, the group of bullies decides to leave, complaining about the cold. But their leader stays behind with a look of hatred on his face. He glares at our hero, who continues running in the rain, unfazed. The aggressor thinks the fat boy is plotting something to reclaim his title as successor. At that moment, the protagonist stops running and stands right in front of the bully. The boy realizes he heard everything, but is pretending that nothing happened. From a distance, the maid watches the scene, worried about what might happen. With the master's clothes in her hands, the maid glares at the bullies with a defiant look. The girl then gets an angry expression and seems determined to do something. After some time, the sun finally shines again in the heavenly clan. In the training ground, we see several wooden swords lined up on a rack. With that, our hero picks up one of the weapons to start a new type of training. With the sword in hand, the boy prepares to practice his moves. He then begins to train the strikes he learned in his past life as a warrior. With a smile on his face, he realizes his body is finally responding well. He already has the stamina to lift a sword, and this will speed up the absorption of the elixirs. At another moment, the bully gets angry with the maid and tells her to take back what she said. Seeing the scene, the other apprentices just stand there, watching the commotion. The girl bravely defends her master and yells at the aggressor not to insult him. Our protagonist is surprised to see the brave attitude of his only ally. The bully becomes furious with the girl's audacity and grabs her forcefully by the collar. The bully is furious with the maid's audacity and tells her to repeat what she said. Without fear, the girl demands that he take back the insult he made to her young master. The other apprentices just watch as the aggressor gets irritated with the situation. He can't believe a simple maid dares to challenge him and is blinded by rage. But the young woman stands firm in her position, showing no fear. Tired of this conversation, the bully decides to draw his weapon to threaten her. He then says he will put the blade to her neck to see if she changes her tune. But suddenly, an unexpected figure appears and blocks the aggressor's attack. The boy is completely shocked and tries to understand what just happened. Our hero then steps in front of the maid and protects her using his own sword. The aggressor is confused by the young master's action and stares at him in disbelief. With a serious look, the protagonist glares at the bully without saying a word. The boy tries to stutter some excuse, but our hero interrupts him immediately. The protagonist then tells him to point the sword at the right person. He challenges the aggressor to say everything he wanted to say to the maid, but directly to him. With his blade pointed, the young man challenges him to settle things with their swords. The bully can't believe it and asks if he's being challenged to a duel. With a smirk, our hero repeats the word duel thoughtfully. Then he raises the stakes and asks what his rival thinks of a life or death battle. The young man proposes that if the bully wins, he will never set foot in the training ground again. The maid is shocked by her master's attitude and calls him by his title. The bully yells that he hasn't held a sword in a month and tries to stop him. With a single strike, the wooden sword breaks in two, leaving the maid speechless. With a serious expression, our hero says he can tolerate insults against himself, but he states that he will not accept offenses against someone who cares for him. He says this is his conviction and challenges the bully to the fight. The aggressor hesitates and asks if he really promises to fight, and our hero confirms. With little choice, the rival accepts the duel and prepares for combat. He believes his strength and speed are superior, and that the fat boy has no chance of winning. With a cold gaze, our hero fearlessly calls him pathetic and a scoundrel. An aura of power begins to emanate from the young master as he faces his opponent. The bully is terrified by that energy and wonders what that inexplicable spirit is. With a furious look, the protagonist grinds his teeth and asks if his rival is scared. The aggressor backs away a little, and our hero warns that if he doesn't come to attack, then the protagonist himself charges forward at the bully without hesitation. With a smirk, the rival says it was a good try, but he's too slow. Suddenly, the two swords clash in a flash of light, and sparks fly through the air. The sound of metal echoes through the courtyard as the force of the impact surprises the aggressor. With the force of the blow, the bully's sword flies through the air, leaving him disarmed. The protagonist points his sword at the rival, who is shocked, not understanding how he lost. The rival wonders if the target from the beginning wasn't him, but his sword. He then questions the sword technique used, and when that scoundrel got so strong, our hero reminds him that this was a life or death duel, and he was careless. With that, the aggressor falls to his knees on the ground, and the protagonist calls him pathetic. The young master says he doesn't deserve to wield that sword is the other's watch. We see that our hero's hand is bleeding from the impact of the blow. He then tells his rival to think about the reason he holds a sword, and to come back when he finds it. Kneeling, the bully reflects on the winner's words and his reason for fighting. With the duel over, the protagonist calls the maid so they can leave. The aggressor is left behind shocked, and looks at his empty hand, not believing his defeat. His hand trembles as he realizes he lost not only the duel, but also his honor. On his knees, he watches the young master walk away with the girl by his side. Back in his room, the maid begins to apologize for getting involved earlier. She then says she shouldn't have stepped forward and caused all that trouble. Our hero listens to the apology in silence while holding his sword. The girl explains that she got very upset seeing the others mock his effort. With her face to the floor, she apologizes for him hurting his hand because of her. He thinks to himself that the injury was from using too powerful a technique and says it wasn't her fault. Surprised, the young woman raises her head and looks at her master, not understanding his reaction. Then he repeats that he doesn't tolerate insults against those who care about him. With a smile, he says that to protect his people, he won't tolerate anything, no matter the opponent. The maid's eyes widen at her master's kind words. With that, the girl remembers a New Year's wish the young master made in the past. The boy says he would become a family head as strong as an elephant to protect everyone, and he promises that the next day he would begin his sword training. The little master then tells the maid that even though she is taller than him, he promises that he would protect her too, and a tear runs down the young woman's face. Back in the present, the girl cries with happiness seeing his change in attitude. She then realizes that this is the old master she knew and so greatly admired. Suddenly, a mysterious voice questions if he can take responsibility for those words. The young master is confused and looks at the maid, not understanding the sudden question. With a serious expression, he turns to face the owner of the mysterious voice that appeared. The figure reveals himself as the young master's uncle, one of the three pillars of the Cheon family. The man is also the Grand Master of the Heavenly Dragon and Heavenly Phoenix sword bodies. The man named Cheon Sanhak repeats the question with a stern look on his face. Our hero greets him respectfully and apologizes for being ignorant and not visiting him. A memory from his past life surfaces, and he remembers that man. But the uncle calls him pathetic and tells him to stop wasting time and answer the question. He realizes his uncle's attitude was the same as 15 years ago when he declared him a lost cause. With the sword in hand, he says that protecting his people is his conviction and he takes responsibility for it. The uncle scoffs at his nephew's words about protecting his people and having a conviction. He then recognizes the sword technique used in the duel as the dragon's claw. The man explains that since this technique is secret, the young man could only have learned it from a traitor. Angrily, he says he will find and severely punish the traitor and anyone who helped him. Our hero realizes that this is just an excuse to ban him from the training ground forever. With that, the young master prepares to reveal the identity of the supposed traitor. The uncle glares at his nephew with hatred in his eyes, eagerly awaiting an answer. The boy understands that he needs to choose his words very carefully to not get into trouble. Then he finally answers and tells his uncle that there is no traitor in the clan. Not understanding, the Grand Master is shocked by his nephew's unexpected answer. The boy explains that he just copied the technique after seeing it by chance a single time. Hearing the excuse, the uncle lets out a disdainful laugh, not believing it. The man then starts to laugh out loud, finding the young man's explanation completely ridiculous. With his sword in hand, he says that this is ridiculous and prepares for combat. Without a second thought, the Grand Master leaps toward his nephew to attack him. He claims that someone like the young man could not imitate the technique and challenges him to a duel. Our hero gets worried and prepares for the confrontation, gripping his sword tightly. A red and terrifying aura of power begins to emanate from the Grand Master's body. The boy says that if he doesn't believe him, then he should show him another technique to copy. With the bold proposal, the Grand Master is left completely speechless and shocked. Blood drips from the young master's hand, but he doesn't back down from the challenge. The uncle accuses him of lying to get away with it, and says he doesn't trust a word he says. With that, he turns and calls the boy's maid to question her about what happened. He then orders the girl to tell him what scheme her master is plotting. With a threatening look, the Grand Master warns that if she dares to lie to him, he would cut her down right there without a second thought, leaving the young woman terrified. The girl's face turns pale, and sweat drips down her forehead from fear. With trembling hands, she tries to find the right words to answer. She then says that for the last month, the young master has been smiling all the time. We see the maid observing her master, who smiles with pride at his own effort. The uncle is completely confused and questions what she means by that. He wonders how that brat who always exploded with rage could possibly smile. Stuttering, the young woman confirms that he has really changed his attitude in recent days. In secret, she remembers watching the boy train with a smile on his face. She says that even while running through the training ground, the young master would smile. The boy smiled with happiness for working hard for himself for the first time. Our hero then says that he saw everything and understands the girl's concern for him. He explains that he was happy to be working hard for himself, and that motivated him. The maid continues, saying that even when the others mocked him, he didn't care. And for the first time, he drew his sword not out of anger, but to protect her. With a voice full of emotion, the maid says that her master has changed, and that she believes in him. The Grand Master listens to the girl's testimony and reflects on his nephew's supposed change. With a thoughtful look, he seems to finally consider the possibility that he might be wrong. The uncle asks what martial art he knows, and the boy says it is the art of the heavenly sun. With that, the Grand Master raises 2 fingers and says he will give him a deadline of 2 months. He then challenges him to defeat the best apprentice in 2 months to prove his worth. With an intense gaze, the man asks if his nephew is capable of completing the challenge. Our hero thinks to himself that his uncle always tested him this way in the past, but with a confident smile, he replies that 1 month is more than enough. The Grand Master is silent for a moment, surprised by the bold response. His hand rests on the hilt of his sword as he stares at the young master. Then the uncle accepts the bet and says, "So be it." Turning to leave, with a victorious smile, the boy watches his uncle walk away slowly. Afterward, he turns to the maid and tells her they should go back, but the girl is confused. The protagonist then says with a smile that he still needs to run a little more. The maid smiles, happy with her master's determination, and watches him with admiration. Half a month passes, and our hero continues his intense training without rest. In the training courtyard, he practices his sword movements with great agility. He thinks that he has already dissolved almost all the yang energy, but the yin energy still hinders him. The boy regrets not being able to enter the library to learn a better cultivation method. With that, he looks at his hand and wishes his energy center would heal on its own like the wound. Meanwhile, some apprentices comment that the top apprentice had the chance to take down the young master. One of them says to keep it down because he might hear and give up on the fight before it even starts. The other thinks that spreading rumors was the Grand Master's intention to make the young man give up. But our hero overhears the entire conversation and gets a serious look on his face. Another group of bullies scoffs, saying the young master doesn't know the difference between a sword and a hoe. Suddenly, the protagonist appears and asks if they have something funny to share. With a serious look, he faces the group's leader and asks if he is the top apprentice. The boy is a bit surprised by the young master's sudden question and stares back at him. Then he sits down and confirms he is the top apprentice, but tells the young master not to worry about the fight. The protagonist feels like he's seen that face before and asks what the boy's name is. With a smirk, the apprentice introduces himself as Lee Sokji and crosses his arms. Upon hearing the name, our hero is completely shocked and has a flash of memory. He then remembers that this man was the traitor who leaked information to the demonic cult. Angrily, the boy grinds his teeth as he realizes he has found the one responsible for the clan's ruin. The traitor says it's an honor to be remembered, and our hero turns to leave. The young master thinks he was just planning to do his best, but now he's changed his mind. With hatred in his eyes, he vows that the wretched traitor will pay for everything he's done. Half a month passes, and the day of the great duel between the two warriors finally arrives. In the crowd, some comment that they can't wait to see the young master get crushed. Suddenly, a man shouts, telling everyone to be silent for the start of the duel. He then announces that the fight arranged by the Grand Master is about to begin and calls the fighters. Sitting on his throne, the protagonist's uncle calls the challenger, Lee Sokji, to the arena. The traitor then walks up the stairs and accepts the call with a confident smile on his face. With his wooden sword in hand, the rival turns to the crowd, looking very self-assured. Next, the man announces the name of the other challenger, our protagonist, Cheon Muryang. But to everyone's surprise, the young master doesn't appear, and the announcer is confused. He then looks for the boy in the crowd, but can't find him. The crowd begins to whisper, wondering if the fat boy ran away, scared of the duel. One of the apprentices lets out a mocking chuckle upon noticing the young man hasn't shown up. With that, all the other warriors begin to laugh and mock the cowardly young master. Seeing the scene, the uncle has an unfriendly look on his face, while the traitor smiles victoriously. But suddenly, a mysterious voice says that Cheon Muryang is there, leaving the rival surprised. The Grandmaster is also shocked and turns to see where the voice came from. In the distance, we see our hero calmly walking toward the arena with his maid. The boy then calmly walks up the stairs and prepares to enter the battlefield. The crowd is confused because they don't recognize him and wonder where the fat boy from before is. They then realize that this man, with an impressive physique, is the young master. With a serious and confident look, the boy introduces himself and says he has just arrived. Everyone is stunned by the change and wonders how he lost so much weight. The boy then looks up to the upper level where his uncle is watching him with a serious expression. With his sword in hand, he bows and apologizes to the Grandmaster for being late. But the man tells him to set aside the formalities and asks if he is prepared. With a confident smile, the young master says that of course he is and gets ready to fight. At that, the two opponents face each other in the middle of the arena, ready for the combat to begin. The rival thinks it's ridiculous for him to face him after only 1 month of sword training. The traitor then wonders what the Grand Master was thinking by allowing this fight. Then he notices that the Heavenly Dragon and Phoenix captains are also watching everything. With that, the rival decides he will use this chance to leave a good impression on them. Our hero notices that his opponent is already planning how to please his superiors. He thinks that his rival is a rotten parasite who clings to power to get ahead in life. The protagonist remembers that after entering the Heavenly Dragon's sword corpse, the traitor got close to power through politics, and not with his skill with the sword, and blinded by greed, he sold all the information to the demonic cult in the past. The boy remembers that when he realized it, it was already too late, but now he will judge him. He thinks that the rival hasn't committed the crime yet, and that's why he needs to be stopped now. Meanwhile, the traitor thinks that everything went well, and that's why he became the top apprentice. But our hero thinks that his rival's luck has run out, as he knows all his dirty secrets. With a smile on his face, he declares that his opponent's career ends there today. The announcer then says that the fight continues until he says stop, and it is not a duel to the end. With that, the two opponents prepare for combat with their swords in hand. The traitor glares at the young master with a mocking smile on his face. The Grand Master then yells for the duel to finally begin once and for all. Without wasting time, the protagonist charges straight at his opponent, but the rival dodges the attack and prepares for a counterattack with a smile. With a downward strike, the traitor tries to hit the young master with full force. He then says he heard about the bizarre technique the boy used to win the last duel. With a smirk, the rival changes his stance and challenges him to try the same thing on him. Our hero then advances to attack again with a serious and determined look. The rival challenges him to try and rip the sword from his hand if he is able. Suddenly, the two wooden swords clash with impressive force. The impact of the blow sends sparks flying, and the two glare at each other with hatred in their eyes. The protagonist is surprised by his opponent's strength, while the rival grinds his teeth. The two warriors are locked in a struggle of strength in the middle of the arena. With a quick move, our hero backs away and begins a sequence of strikes. The boy then attacks his opponent with a series of fast and precise attacks. With a focused gaze, he continues to pressure his rival with his agile movements. The young master then spins and attacks with all his strength in a final blow. The rival says he was going to show some mercy for the sake of the young master's dignity, but he claims he can't waste the chance to show off for the grandmasters. The rival tells him not to hate him too much, as the boy grinds his teeth in pain. Suddenly, our hero's wooden sword breaks in two from the force of the blow. With his guard down, the traitor seizes the opportunity and grabs his opponent's wrist. Then he uses his foot to trip the young master and throw him off balance. Our protagonist loses his balance and starts to fall to the ground, defenseless. But with a quick move, he manages to recover and avoid the fall at the last second. With a determined look, the boy faces his opponent, not letting himself be shaken. A pink aura of power begins to emanate from the traitor's body as he prepares a strike. With a wicked smile, he tells the young master to watch very carefully. The rival then uses his secret technique to attack the protagonist with everything he has. Our hero is surprised by the speed and strength of the unexpected attack. A flurry of blows hits the young master, who seems to have no way to defend himself. The traitor then boasts about the huge difference in level between the two warriors. With that, the protagonist falls to the ground, apparently defeated by the overwhelming attack. The rival says it was a shame to fight a scoundrel, but it served to show off his skill. With a victorious smile, he then raises his fist in the air in celebration. The traitor says everything went as planned and prepares to receive applause. But he finds the silence strange and wonders why he can't hear anything. Confused, he looks around and realizes the training ground seems to be sideways. The rival then realizes he is on the ground with a piece of wood in his mouth. The rival wonders what happened and sees a boot approaching his face. With that, he realizes the young master is standing right in front of him. With a mocking smile, the protagonist asks if his rival had a good nap. Not understanding anything, the aggressor wonders why he is lying on the ground. Then he realizes his body won't move and goes into a total panic. Completely paralyzed, the traitor is left lying in the arena, unable to move. Next to him, the boy sees the broken piece of his wooden sword. Suddenly, a flash of memory comes to his mind, and he finally remembers everything. He recalls that he was actually the one who was attacked by the young master. Our hero's sword clashed with his and shattered it to pieces instantly. The boy then remembers that his weapon had already been completely destroyed. With wide eyes, the rival recalls the exact moment of his defeat. The protagonist used a powerful technique that pulverized the traitor's sword, and with the same blow, he hit his opponent square in the face. The force of the attack was so great that the rival flew through the air with no reaction. Back in the present, the traitor finally understands that he was completely defeated. He can't believe he lost to someone like that useless, fat boy from before. Our hero then calls him a potential traitor, leaving the rival confused. With a serious look, he warns him to be careful because he'll be keeping an eye on him. The loser tries to justify himself, saying he just lowered his guard for a second. Lying on the ground, the rival wonders what he should do now. Our hero stands beside him, while the traitor thinks he is completely ruined. The crowd is in shock and wonders if the fight really ended with a single blow. With tears in her eyes, the maid watches everything and calls out for her young master. The protagonist then faces his uncle, who is watching him from the upper level. The Grand Master looks back at him with a very serious expression on his face. With that, the young master remains, standing next to his fallen opponent in the arena. The boy's uncle continues to stare at him with a serious look, saying nothing. Our hero then stares back at him with an expression of pure determination. The entire crowd is silent, shocked by the unexpected outcome of the duel. One of the captains then clenches his fists tightly, showing his anger. He then complains that that fool ruined the chance to expel the young master. With hatred in his eyes, the man grinds his teeth and says that this is very irritating. In a flash, we see the moment the protagonist kicks his opponent away. The traitor then falls defeated on the ground with his wooden sword completely broken. Our hero stands over his rival with an expression of superiority from his throne. The Grand Master just observes the whole scene with his arms crossed. The crowd then begins to wonder if the young man used some kind of trick to win. The boy thinks that with this victory, that scoundrel will become even more conceited now. The boy's uncle then looks at him with a suspicious gaze, trying to understand what happened. The uncle stands up and prepares to announce the grand winner of the match. But our hero shouts that he knows about all the grievances they have against him. Hearing this, the Grand Master gets a serious expression on his face. The boy acknowledges that the mistakes he made in the past cannot be erased. While his uncle glares at him angrily, the maid seems worried about the situation. He tells the crowd that he doesn't remember the faces of everyone he has wronged, and he claims that those acts were committed by the old Cheon Muryang, not by him. Even so, he says he will bear the punishment for all those sins. With that, the young man clenches his fist with great force and determination. He then turns to the crowd and says that now he is the new Cheon Muryang. The boy then apologizes for all his outrageous behavior in the past. With that, he bows in a sincere apology to everyone present. With his back to the audience, he remains bowed as a sign of repentance. The other apprentices watch the scene completely shocked and without reaction. With eyes full of tears, the maid watches her master with great pride. The Grand Master also seems surprised by his nephew's unexpected attitude. After apologizing, the young master stands up and faces everyone again. He then says that if that is not enough to satisfy their anger, he challenges them to come to the training ground at any time because he will be there. With a confident look, the boy turns to the side, showing his new determination. The Grand Master watches the scene in silence, showing no reaction. With that, our hero calls the maid so they can leave. The uncle then becomes thoughtful and seems to be reflecting on everything that happened. We see a blue sky with the sun shining brightly through the leaves. The boy thanks the girl for holding the sword, and she says the weapon gave her strength. He then asks for the sword back, but the young woman is surprised and asks why. Our hero is confused by the girl's reaction and looks at her, not understanding. The maid hugs the sword and says she needs to keep Little Heaven a little longer. The protagonist is left speechless, not understanding the nickname she gave the weapon. Suddenly, a voice questions him about what he tried to cut, and the boy turns around. The young man then approaches the building, where his uncle is watching him from the upper level. With a smile, he thinks that he never imagined hearing those words again. The uncle asks why he doesn't question what the boy himself wanted to cut with the sword. Our hero then replies with a smile that his target was the sky. With a confident look, he states that his goal was to cut the sky itself. The Grand Master is completely shocked by his nephew's unexpected answer. With a serious expression, he thinks that idea is completely absurd. The man reflects that this was the path he pursued his entire life, and now his nephew understands it. With that, the uncle admits that he won the bet and will grant him one wish. The young man asks to enter the library of the Heavenly Dragon, but his uncle denies the request. The boy becomes thoughtful, as his main plan has gone down the drain. Then he has an idea and asks to train with one person per day. The uncle is surprised by the request and asks if that's all he wants. With a smile, he confirms and says there is no better training than real combat. The Grand Master looks at him for a moment, seeming to consider the proposal. Then the uncle turns and says that his nephew will get stronger every day. With his wooden sword in hand, the boy says that's what he's hoping for. With the deal sealed, the Grand Master leaves, leaving the two behind. The maid asks what he meant by cutting the sky, but he says it's a secret. The next day, a new morning begins to dawn in the Heavenly Clan. One of the bullies kicks the ground in anger and complains that this is very annoying. He complains that the young master is getting arrogant just because he got lucky once. But the group's leader thinks that it actually turned out to be a good thing. In the end, the aggressor holds his sword firmly. Then he unsheathers his weapon with a look full of ill intent. The reflection on the blade makes him remember a past event with the former master. He remembers the fat young master causing trouble in the city as always. The former heir introduced himself as the great young master of the Cheon family. The bully and his friends were at an expensive tavern thanks to the young master. One of his friends advises him not to get involved because he could get in trouble. The old fat master was shouting furiously and asking if he was some kind of joke. On the floor, a servant was trying to warn that it was dangerous and asking him to back away. Suddenly, the sword's blade moves at an impressive speed. With that, the weapon hits the bully's face, who is shocked by the wound. The boy's blood begins to run and drip onto the tavern floor. The fat boy then questions him for getting in his way, and the bully calls him an idiot. With a bleeding mouth, the aggressor glares at his opponent with great hatred in his eyes. The former master accuses him of faking the injury and tells him to get out of there. Back in the present, the aggressor's reflection on the blade shows all his rage. He then vows to leave the same wound on the protagonist's face, making it look like an accident. We see the young master leaping from an incredible height while preparing a devastating sword strike. He descends through the air with great agility, focusing all his strength into a single attack. With an extremely serious look, the protagonist perfectly executes the vertical slash technique. Watching from a distance, this guy with a scarred face gets furious for being ignored. At that moment, the brute grinds his teeth in a rage, because no one paid him any mind. Meanwhile, the boy's faithful assistant arrives, serving some warm tea to calm things down. The grumpy warrior is confused by the kindness and stares at the young woman, not understanding what's going on. With a calm smile, she explains that her boss goes into a total trance when he starts training hard. The big guy then asks if she's the servant the master protected during that epic duel. The lovely girl maintains her posture and looks directly at the visitor while holding the tray of snacks. He remains suspicious but agrees to observe the situation a little more calmly. With that, the young woman shows incredible determination in her eyes, proving she has complete faith in her lord. The two of them stand in the courtyard talking, while the new leader continues his tiring routine in the background. She admits she's quite worried because the hero has been pushing himself too hard lately. The fighter asks why she is so dedicated, since the old hare used to be a horrible person. Even so, the young woman states that the ruler has truly changed and now seeks to fix his past mistakes. With great hope, she says she believes in the new purpose in life that the young master has chosen. Taking a sip of tea, the man admits he really does feel something different in the boy's behavior. At that moment, he realizes the hare just keeps repeating the same jumping slash over and over all day. But upon a closer look, the veteran notices that there's something very powerful hidden in that simple training. He realizes the young master's foot position is always the same. On top of that, the height of the sword, and even the strength of his grip, are repeated with absurd perfection. Seeing this, the man wonders how that reckless boy managed to achieve such a high level of mastery. Then, analyzing the blade's trajectory, he notices that all the strikes go in the same direction. With this realization, the veteran turns pale with fear as he understands the true purpose of the training. Desperate, he wonders if the boy had been aiming at him the whole time. The blade then stops just a few inches from his face, leaving the brute in shock. With his whole body on edge, the warrior looks up at the sky, trying to process the situation. He doesn't understand how the hare was already pointing the weapon at him before the fight even began. Just then, the hero finishes his training and apologizes for making his visitor wait. He then introduces himself and greets the veteran by name, calling him Cheon Muryang. Startled, the man questions how the young master knew his name. The boy explains that one day he will become an official warrior of the family, so he memorized the name. Muryang becomes even more confused by the boy's dedication to memorizing the names of all the apprentices. But the protagonist notices the scar on his rival's face and asks if he was the one who caused that injury. With a furious look, the veteran confirms that he was, making the mood very tense. The hare understands it was the body's previous owner who caused it, which is why he didn't remember. So he sheaths his weapon and prepares to apologize for something he didn't commit. With a gesture of respect, the boy bows and apologizes for a past mistake that cannot be erased. From a distance, we see the protagonist sincerely apologizing while the maid and the warrior watch. The veteran is shocked because the old young master never admitted his mistakes and always blamed others. He then wonders if this person bowing in apology is the same person from before. With that, the warrior picks up his teacup and finally admits that he has been defeated. The man then says he lost today, even though the duel hasn't officially started yet, but he promises that next time he will prepare better and challenge the hare again. With that said, the veteran turns his back and walks away, leaving the two of them behind. Quite confused, the hero wonders if his apology was accepted, since he saw the guy give a slight smile. However, the maid disagrees and says that the warrior didn't smile at all. Ignoring this, the young master calls his faithful servant by name and says he has a request. He then asks the young woman to write down on a piece of paper all the mistakes he has ever made, without forgetting a single thing. The girl gets worried, but the boy insists that she write down all the suffering he put her through. With a determined look, he states that this is the beginning of correcting his mistakes, and a burden he must carry. Starting the next day, the daily duels finally began to take place in the training courtyard. One of the apprentices then charges forward, yelling that this is retribution for all his sins. Fearlessly, our hero leaps into the air to meet the challenger with his wooden sword. With a powerful strike, the here's sword lands a direct hit on the opponent's head. The apprentice then falls to the ground, completely defeated. With his wooden weapon beside him, the protagonist then compliments him and says they should fight again when they get another chance. But most were defeated in a single exchange of blows, and no one could beat the young master. On the side, the servant jots down the score with a victorious smile, showing a long list of wins. One of the apprentices who was defeated has a very thoughtful expression. He remembers how the young master used to be, and how different he is now. With a sense of defeat, he then turns and leaves the courtyard. In the end, the hare's scoreboard showed he was still undefeated with 6 victories. Meanwhile, elsewhere, we see the protagonist meditating in his room. He is sitting by the window, trying to control the flow of energy in his body. The boy realizes that yin energy is still blocking his meridians and the flow of kuai. Because of this, even though he has a lot of stored energy, he can't use it properly. He then understands that his current martial art is weak, and he needs something stronger. But a strange feeling bothers him, as if he's forgetting something important. Suddenly, the boy has a revelation and goes into a total panic. He gets up in a hurry because he remembered that the head of the family returns today. He is anxious to see the man who took him in when he had no one. In his formal clothes, the young master prepares for the big meeting. At that moment, he wonders if he should call the head of the family, father. But another servant comes running in, calling for him desperately. He recognizes the girl and asks what happened to his main servant. The girl explains, crying, that her friend is with the young master's fiancé. Upon hearing the news, our hero is completely shocked, not knowing what to do. In another room, we see a messy table with food scattered all over the floor. On the floor, the maid trembles with fear, with food all around her. She apologizes desperately while the fiancé looks at her own clothes, stained with sauce. With a cold and arrogant look, the fiancé stares at the poor girl without a shred of pity. Surrounded by several guards, the maid remains on the floor, begging for forgiveness. With her face down, she looks desperate about what might happen. But the woman says that a simple apology won't clean her soiled clothes. Hiding her face with a fan, she orders them to handle the matter according to the law. With that, one of the guards approaches with a very menacing look. The man then draws his weapon, preparing to punish the young servant. He raises the blade high as the girl trembles in fear on the floor. Desperate, the other servant runs, screaming, to try to prevent the tragedy. But the guard doesn't care, and his weapon glows with a powerful energy. Suddenly, our hero leaps from above and blocks the strike at the last second. The fiancée and her guard are shocked by the young master's unexpected appearance. With a serious look, the boy lands on the ground, protecting his faithful servant. The other guards are confused by the scene and don't understand what's happening. He then asks what they think they are doing to his maid. One of the men questions him for daring to interfere in the affairs of the Tang clan. With a confident look, he introduces himself as the young master of the Cheon family. The woman then apologizes and says she came from the Sichuan Tang clan for the meeting. With a mysterious smile, she introduces herself as Tang Soai. Our hero then remembers that in his past life, she was his wife. She was known as the ice flower for her cold and calculating beauty. The head of the Cheon family proposed the marriage because the Tang clan would heal his body. They accepted the deal to fulfill their ambition of expanding their territory. That's why the young woman arrived already dressed for a wedding and accepted the first meeting. After the wedding, the head of the family showed great weakness for the Tang clan. They took advantage of the situation, and the marriage was the beginning of the fall. Back in the present, the boy faces his fiancée, already aware of the whole evil plan. He repeats the question and asks what she was doing to his servant. The woman points to the stain on her clothes with a mocking expression. She then says she was just punishing the maid who soiled her clothes. The hero is furious that she would try something like that for such a trivial reason. But the fiancé says he only sees the servant and not the type of clothes she was wearing. With that, she suggests the girl could be an assassin in disguise. The boy yells that this is ridiculous and that in the Cheon family, they follow their own laws. Wielding his sword, he says that her claim insults his family and his people. One of the guards says the young master is insulting the law of the Tang clan. With a wicked smile, the young woman says she will apply her law and challenges him to stop her. At that, one of the henchmen releases a powerful aura, preparing to attack. Our hero is surprised to see the opponent's sword aura, which shines brightly. With that, the two blades clash in a flash of sparks and pure energy. The boy is in shock from his rival's strength and feels enormous pressure. Then, the protagonist is pushed back by the guard's overwhelming power. The maid shouts her master's name, worried about the dangerous situation. But the fiancé just watches with a mocking smile, holding a thin needle. This needle in her hand suggests she might have some dirty trick up her sleeve. With that, the Tang family guard prepares for a new attack with his sword aura. The henchman charges forward with full force, and our hero struggles to defend against the series of blows. He realizes his enemy is very strong and must be a first-class warrior. Once again, the swords meet and create an explosion of bluish light. The young master understands that his rival's internal and external energy is far superior. So he changes his stance and prepares to use a new combat strategy. A blue grid appears in his mind as he executes an analysis technique. He uses the sword of subtle technique to find an opening in the enemy's attack. The secret to this skill is not to aim at the opponent, but it's something else. He focuses his gaze on the enemy's weapon, as that is his true target. The moment the sword enters his range, he activates the dragon claws. The hare then uses the dragon capture technique of the heavenly sword unit. With a blinding flash, the technique finally connects with the target. The blade hits the ground with great force, creating an impact that makes everything around it shake. The enemy guardian is astonished to realize that the hare's blow was easily blocked. With clenched teeth, the young master shows an expression of pure shock at his move's failure. With that, the weapon falls to the floor, and the sound of metal echoes throughout the training courtyard. The brute mocks the situation, commenting that he expected something much more impressive from a fighter of that level. Realizing the huge power difference, the protagonist retreats and notes that his special capture technique didn't work. Watching the fight from afar, the arrogant fiancée says she's glad she came to check on her groom in person. Walking with an air of superiority, she warns that she expects to see more gentle behavior during the feast that will be held today. Then, the other servant screams in despair while holding the body of her friend, who has fallen to the cold floor. The boy is frozen in horror upon seeing the deplorable state of his most faithful assistant. With an icy glare, the lady of the Tang clan leaves the area, accompanied by her numerous private bodyguards. She reflects that the here's condition is very different from what she heard, and this could ruin her evil plans. At that moment, the woman asks her elite fighter what he thought of the opponent's real skills. The veteran replies that the boy is weak, and that just 2 subordinates would be enough to take him down. But the villainess orders them to send 4 men at once to make sure the boy doesn't show up at the feast, no matter what. Desperate, the protagonist holds the unconscious young woman and begs her to try to stay conscious at all costs. He analyzes her condition and begins to suspect that a deadly poison was used in a cowardly way. Looking at the scattered food, the hero feels an uncontrollable fury building inside his chest at this scene. He remembers how happy the young woman was moments before, promising to bring a special meal for her master. Overcome by hatred, the master grinds his teeth and silently swears that all those responsible will pay dearly. With the maid in his arms, the hero shouts in rage and swears he will get revenge on everyone responsible. He then asks the other servant for his sword, and she quickly hands the weapon to her master. Hiding nearby, a young apprentice is shocked by the scene and wonders what in the world happened there. With that, the protagonist runs to the clan's medical wing, seeking immediate treatment for his friend. He then explains to the healers that he has already administered first aid to contain the poison, but the doctor says he can only delay the symptoms and that a full recovery is impossible without the antidote. Lying on the bed, the young woman trembles in pain as dark veins begin to appear on her arm. The young master remains silent with a serious look, processing his servant's terrible situation. He then turns and entrusts the patient's care to the other girl as he prepares to leave. With his sword in hand, the boy starts to walk away, but the servant worriedly asks where he is going. He replies that he heard about the feast in his father's honor and that he absolutely cannot miss it. With a furious look, the hare decides he will go back to being the old, despicable young master, just for today. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the palace, a man in a red cape walks with a thoughtful air. He wonders why his brother got involved with the Tang clan, a group as dangerous as a tiger. With a sharp gaze, the man seems very concerned about the new alliances being formed. After much thought, he turns and continues walking down the luxurious hallway of the Grand Hall. But suddenly, a powerful, evil aura makes him stop in his tracks, completely tense. At the same time, in a nearby forest, birds fly away in fear of a mysterious presence. The flock of birds indicates that something very dangerous is rapidly approaching the area. With that, the protagonist draws his blade, preparing for the fight that is about to begin. With his blade, he unleashes all his fury on a thick tree trunk. The young master continues the attack with a series of fast and powerful strikes. Watching from a distance, an older man seems very impressed by the scene. He then comments that this technique is not the famous sky-splitting sword. At that, the veteran senses that the boy's blade carries hatred and an intent to harm. With a worried look, he fears the boy might be consumed by his own anger, but the hare shouts, releasing all his frustration in one last move. With that, he jumps high into the air and delivers a vertical slash with full force. The energy of the blow is so intense that the trunk splits into 2 pieces. Then, the protagonist stares at his work of destruction, A little calmer now. Panting, the young master tries to catch his breath after so much effort, but the man approaches and criticizes him for taking his anger out on a tree. He then asks the reason for all that uncontrolled fury. With his back turned, the boy admits that he feels weak and powerless at the moment because he keeps failing to protect the people who are important to him. The veteran questions who exactly these people he refers to are. With a serious look, the hero replies that they are all those he wishes to protect. At that moment, he declares with conviction that his people are the entire Cheon clan. The man is completely shocked by the young master's unexpected answer. He remembers that in the past, the boy would refer to those who protected him, not the other way around. With a slight smile, the veteran admits he had completely misunderstood the young master. He gets excited and says that he used to think the boy was just imitating his techniques by pure luck. With his hand on his sword, the man then asks if the heir truly stands by his words to protect the clan. Our hero is confused and just asks what the master means by that question. The veteran then reveals that he himself created the dragon capture and also a secret form. With a challenging look, he asks if the young master has the courage to learn this new technique. He releases a powerful aura and says he will show what happens when one dares to touch a dragon's scale. With his sword in hand, he prepares to show the final form of the heavenly dragon sword, the dragon's wrath. The heir is totally shocked by the demonstration of power as the energy surrounds him from all sides. The man then executes the final blow, called the reverse scale slash, with absurd force. From a distance, two apprentices are startled to see a large vortex of energy appearing in the sky. Three other henchmen join them, and one comments that it's in the direction where the heir is. The group's leader orders them to finish the mission quickly, because everything needs to be ready for the feast. With the fianché's poison, they plan to make the boy immobile for a whole day without raising suspicion. The four assassins then begin to move, confident that their disguise as apprentices is perfect. Back at the training, our hero tenses up as he senses a new presence stealthily approaching. He turns to the veteran and asks if he is planning something against his own nephew. The boy looks at the destruction and realizes the overwhelming power of the new move he has learned. The master asks him if he understood the fundamental difference between the two sword techniques. He explains that a true swordsman begins to feel the blade as an extension of his body. He says that the dragon claw capture exploits the illusion that the sword and body are one. He then demonstrates how opponents recklessly charge forward and the blade separates from them. With that, the protagonist finally understands the secret art behind that powerful technique, but the veteran warns him that the dragon claw capture is not invincible and can fail against masters. At this, the heir remembers his humiliating defeat against the arrogant fiancé's guard. He then realizes that even great masters fall for a certain type of illusion. The man then asks if the boy knows what this illusion that can be exploited is. The young master replies that he can now see the principle of the reverse scale slash. With a serious look, the veteran challenges him to perform the technique and prove he truly understands. The heir looks at the destroyed trunks and questions if he can achieve something like that so quickly, but he guarantees with great confidence that he will master the technique before the feast begins. The master then says that's not what he wants to know, but rather if the boy can protect the Cheon clan. The protagonist is surprised by the question but soon breaks into a confident smile. With great determination, he affirms that he can and that he will protect all of his people. Satisfied with the answer, the man praises the boy and prepares to leave the area. He then announces that he's heading to the banquet hall because the atmosphere has been spoiled by some rats. With that said, the veteran turns and leaves the young master alone to deal with the situation. With a smirk, our hero prepares for the confrontation that is about to happen. He then clenches his teeth and says, "It's time to take a look at the faces of these rats." Hiding in the bushes, the four assassins watch the heir, who is already waiting for them.